as Jessica, my name is William Gook, and I'm a Senior Manager and Director of the Federal Business Sector with Mercury Associates. And a little bit about myself. I'm a retired senior federal employee with over 40 years experience in fleet management. I retired in 2011, and I've been working with Mercury ever since to educate fleet managers, administrators, and dispatchers, et cetera, in the science of fleet management. I will be presenting a lot of information during this session about what you must know and why it is important for you to make good decisions on your acquisition of vehicles, whether they are leased or purchased. I will also talk about the advantages and disadvantages of leasing versus buying that you must be aware of. Why is the lease versus buy decision important? First, it's required by the Code of Federal Regulations. Also, the General Services Administration has put out additional guidance in Federal Management Regulation B-30. Understand that FMR B-30 will likely be updated as a result of the new Executive Order 13693. However, it will still be mandatory to perform a lease versus buy analysis anytime you acquire a vehicle. Second, there is potential for you to produce substantial savings, especially for those vehicles that are driven less than 12,000 miles per year, operated on improved roadways, and require little or no upfitting. And of course, within a fleet committee or community, upfitting is when you have to add additional features to a vehicle. So if it's a law enforcement, you're putting lights on it. If it's a truck that's used for soil samples, perhaps you put an auger on it. And those are things that can drive a cost up that may make it more advantageous to own that vehicle rather than lease it. And last, it's considered a fleet management best practice that is used across city, state, federal, and corporate fleets. The pie chart shows how a typical fleet dollar is divided up for an owned asset to include direct and indirect costs. You will notice that the largest cost driver is depreciation. Second is maintenance and repair, and of course fuel is in third place. The reason I wanted to talk about this slide is many fleet managers do not track all of these costs. Most folks that have a fleet management information system only capture acquisition, fuel, and maintenance. They overlook overhead and depreciation, and unfortunately do not include these costs or when looking at the total life cycle cost of a vehicle when deciding to lease or purchase a vehicle. The decision to lease or buy a vehicle has many factors. You must look at the total life cycle costs of the class of vehicle you're considering. This chart is an example of a single axle dump truck. You will notice that the largest cost driver is depreciation, which starts to flatline around year 6. The second thing you will notice is the yellow line for maintenance and operation costs that starts to rapidly increase after year 7. And last is a red line that demonstrates the total cost of ownership for this vehicle, which goes up after year 7. As you can see, the best time to replace this vehicle is somewhere around the 5 and 7 year mark. This is when the depreciation begins to diminish, maintenance and operations costs have not peaked, and you are likely to get the highest residual value on a resale of the vehicle. Let's go over direct costs. For owned vehicles, remember on a previous slide we talked about depreciation, which is the largest cost driver. Next, you have maintenance and operations, and finally fuel. For GSA lease vehicles, you have the sum of the monthly lease rate and end of lease chargeback. Some of you may not be aware of what chargeback is. Chargeback, also known as billback, is a fee assessed to you for any repair that is deemed over and above normal wear and tear when you turn a vehicle back into GSA. Oftentimes, you may not know what this cost is until several months after you turn the vehicle in. And that's kind of the downside to it. Sometimes a fleet manager may get a bill 3-4 months later, and it's quite a surprise, and they have to go get the additional funding in order to pay the lease. What is important here is to make sure you use the chargeback cost for the class of vehicle that you're replacing when making a lease versus buy decision. Because, again, it may take months to know what you're being charged. When you do have data, you can use the average of the historical chargeback costs for vehicles previously turned in to GSA. As you can see, this slide includes vehicle cost categories. For leased vehicles, the differing factor is whether or not it is a dry lease or a wet lease. A dry lease means you pay a basic lease cost plus any fuel, maintenance, and other operational costs. A wet lease typically includes all operational costs with the exception of tolls, insurance, and any unusual wear and tear. Again, that would be the chargeback. Again, a cost driver that is usually unplanned is an end-of-lease chargeback for what is determined as any damages beyond normal wear and tear. And of course, there are many overlooked costs such as upfitting, etc., that I mentioned earlier. Others could be maintenance that is below a certain dollar level. For example, an organizational purchase card may be used to pay for a repair or other operational requirement. Oftentimes, these costs are not captured in the organization's fleet management information system and are therefore unaccounted for in the asset's total cost of ownership. Remember, on a previous slide, you saw that depreciation is the largest cost driver. Although your financial or comptroller offices are likely depreciating the asset on their books, it also needs to be captured in your FMIS. This enables you to make a total cost of ownership determination as to when to replace the vehicle and whether it's more advantageous to lease or buy the vehicle. This slide provides a sample definition for depreciation with the final bullet talking about residual value. For replacement planning, you capture back depreciation when you sell the vehicle. For example, the initial purchase price minus the current fair market value or the proceeds from the sale. This is an example of fair market value and capturing back depreciation based upon the sale of the vehicle. For this example, the vehicle was purchased for $33,000. It had an upfitting cost of $2,000 for a total purchase cost of $35,000. At 8 years, the end of life, it was sold for $3,000, resulting in a fair market depreciation of $4,000 per year. Remember, the depreciation of $4,000 per year is an average over 8 years. The most significant drop is in the first year. What are indirect costs? Indirect costs are often overlooked when making a determination as to whether to lease or buy a vehicle. As you can see, salaries and employee benefits are indirect costs. You can determine these costs by simply contacting your human resource office. Computer support, software, and administrative supplies may be a little bit harder, and you will likely need to contact your IT group and determine an average cost based upon the number of users and terminals in the shops and the administrative support areas. Cost of offices, garages can be difficult as well. You will need to contact your CFO to find out facility depreciation and the fleet portion of the building maintenance cost. The facility manager should have all costs for operating equipment used in the garage, etc. Unless the utilities are metered, you'll need to contact your environmental section to determine utility costs based upon building square feet. And last but not least are tort claims. They are the actual costs resulting from accidents involving fleet vehicles. Let's discuss the advantages of leasing from GSA.
Willie? Oh, there you go.
Right.
Thank you.
Slide. Got one ahead here, I'm sorry. As stated in the first bullet, it eliminates the need for a one-time significant cash outlay. And that is one thing that your comptroller shop really likes. They're able to budget in the out years on how much money they need to set aside to pay for a fleet. When you lease, you pay as you go, and when you buy, you pay before you go. Because most GSA leases are wet leases that include all maintenance, fuel, etc. It's easier to budget because you know exactly what the monthly cost will be. GSA has a 24-hour call center that vehicle operators can call in the event there's an accident or the vehicle requires maintenance. Notices are sent when vehicles are scheduled for maintenance. They also have a state-of-the-art fleet management information system that is part of their drive-through program that will enable you to download all of your federal automotive statistical tool data directly into FAST. And
Willie?
it eliminates, yes.
Willie, excuse me. I think the slides are out of sync with your presentation.
I don't think so.
You need to back up one more. You were just talking about the pros of GSA leasing, and the what's showing on the screen were the cons.
No, I'm one ahead. I am. There we are. I apologize, everybody. I must have hit the button by accident here. Thank you, Scott. Okay. Again, the GSA has a 24-hour call center that vehicle operators can call in the event there's an accident or the vehicle requires maintenance. Notices are sent when vehicles are scheduled for maintenance. They also have a state-of-the-art fleet management information system that is part of the drive-through program that will enable you to download all of your federal automotive statistical tool data directly in the FAST, and it eliminates the need for government-ran garages if you should have one. And finally, unlike most fleets that own their vehicles, GSA replaces vehicles in a timely manner based upon months and mileage. They know when the vehicle will have its greatest resale value. Remember, the newer your fleet, there is less of an opportunity for breakdowns and fewer number of spares that will be required to meet mission requirements. And now the cons. Now, let's talk about the disadvantages of leasing from GSA. Depending on the type of vehicle, there could be a higher cost. This is typically heavy-duty vehicles or vehicles that require a significant amount of upfitting. And these are the types of vehicles that if you own them, you're typically going to keep them in your fleet for an extended period of time. It is not advantageous if your vehicle has very low utilization and you keep it in your fleet again for an extended period of time. Remember, the lease cost is constant regardless of how many miles you put on the vehicle. Mileage is a separate charge over and above the lease cost. Another disadvantage is you are charged by GSA for any damages, wear and tear that's not considered normal, commonly referred again to as chargeback or billback. Oftentimes, you don't know what this is. As I mentioned earlier, it can be several months later. And remember, some types of vehicles may not be available to lease. Typically, these are special use vehicles such as a heavy-duty bucket truck. Now we'll talk about the owning pros, owning or buying. Why should you use GSA's AutoChoice when purchasing vehicles? First, GSA is your mandatory source of supply. Does this mean you have to buy from them? The answer is no. If you find an identical vehicle at a lesser cost after documenting it and gaining approval from your contracting officer, who will also have to get approval from GSA, you can purchase this vehicle from a source other than GSA. Although I doubt you will ever find a vehicle cheaper than what you'll find it offered in AutoChoice. Why would you want to purchase vehicles instead of leasing them? First, you can retain the vehicles for a longer period of time, which, as mentioned earlier, GSA replaces their vehicles based upon mileage and months. Your low utilization vehicles may be kept in your fleet for several years. If you have a state-of-the-art fleet management information system, you will be able to perform a life cycle cost analysis that will help you to determine the best time to replace your vehicles. And for you federal folks out there, that's one of the things that is really hurting a lot of federal agencies. They're still using Excel and various other anecdotal type methods to capture their data, so they're not getting everything they need for total cost of ownership. And finally, if you have vehicles that require upfitting, you may not have to remove the equipment prior to turn-in or resale. What are the cons of owning the vehicle? As mentioned on the previous slide, when you buy vehicles, someone in the office needs to schedule routine maintenance, call to find the least experienced place to get repairs, etc. When leasing, you get the benefit of a call center and approved repair facilities. If you have a problem, it's their job to correct it. This will decrease your administrative time, which is often overlooked in a lease versus buy decision. Because of the significant one-time outlay, it is often hard to get comptroller approval to replace vehicles in a timely manner. As we all know, when it comes time for the budget, the fleet is the last ones to get any money at all, and typically that's why so many of the agencies have very old fleets. This happens across many federal, state, and local governments, and unfortunately results in an old or aging fleet that is less reliable. Spare vehicles are needed as backups while the other vehicles are in the shop. Reduced vehicle safety for drivers, higher maintenance costs, and low utilization for these older vehicles. After all, we all know it's human nature to want to drive the newest vehicle in the fleet. When you own your vehicle, you're required by the Code of Federal Regulations and the FMR B-30 to have a fleet management information system. What does this mean? It means you will need IT support, training, and any additional programming to meet internal requirements. A staff member will be responsible to track the data. Oftentimes, agencies do not have the funding for the state-of-the-art fleet management information system and attempt to develop one in-house. Our experience is that these systems are less reliable, usually do not have the elements for regulatory reporting, and additionally, they're unable to capture all the direct and indirect costs such as maintenance or repairs. Another disadvantage is when you will have to seek additional capital funding should you need to acquire additional vehicles as a result of mission change. And last but not least, you will need to dispose of the vehicle in the event the mission is downsized. This slide represents a life cycle cost break-even point for a lease versus buy decision. As you can see, if the mileage is the only determining factor, you will lease all vehicles that are operated for more than 9,000 miles per year. Remember, there are other factors to consider, such as the capital investment or the funding, upfitting that may be required for the vehicle, chargeback for those GSA vehicles that have damage that is considered to be above normal wear and tear, and you will need an FMIS that meets FMR B-30 requirements. Plus, you have the fleet manager, administrative time, and many more that we can talk about. These are just a few suggested actions that you can take to better manage your fleet. If you do not have a fleet management handbook, develop one. This will establish clear lines of authority, cause awareness of fleet requirements cited in the United States Code, Code of Federal Regulations, executive orders, and the Federal Management Regulations. You need to be able to identify all indirect and direct costs associated to your fleet, such as utilities, computer support, administrative, overhead, buildings, etc., and etc. The list can go on. You need to be able to develop total cost of ownership for selected vehicle types and classes and know your cost differential against current age of your fleet. Remember, if the average age of your fleet is 5 years, then you have vehicles ranging anywhere from 0 to 10 years old. And last, you need to undertake and document your lease versus buy analysis and document your decision process in your fleet management plan, which is an annual requirement. In summary, you need to consider all costs, both direct and indirect, when making the decision as to lease or buying a vehicle. Both the Fleet Management Plan and the Federal Automobile Statistical Tool mandate that you drill down and capture all costs associated with the operation and management of your fleet. This requirement is for vehicle line item data. If you don't have an FMIS, this will be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to do. Unlike GSA lease fleets, you need to know the total cost of ownership for your own vehicles. And again, that includes both direct and the soft indirect cost. Once again, direct costs are depreciation, fuel, maintenance. Indirect costs are utilities, computer support, training, employee salaries and benefits, and basically any cost that cannot be directly attributed to a specific vehicle. For the owned fleet, you need to optimize the total cost of ownership. Know the best time to replace that class of vehicles. Remember the slide on the single axle dump truck. When total cost of ownership starts on the upward swing, it is time to replace that vehicle in your fleet. And finally, I don't know how many of you are aware of the NPMA SIG, but the NPMA has many special interest groups, or SIGs, which are dedicated, one of which is dedicated to fleet. You do not need to be a member to participate. There is no fee. The SIG is an opportunity for you to reach back to other fleet professionals and discuss lessons learned, share experiences, and work on fleet-related issues. To join the SIG, you can go to the link provided, or you can go to the NPMA website. There's a big box on there that you click on. It will list all the SIGs that are available, and that will connect you. This concludes the lease versus buy discussion. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
I'm taking a final look here, Willie. I don't see any questions entered or hands raised. Okay, no questions, Willie.
Okay, well, fantastic. Well, thank everybody that participated. I do appreciate it. I know there's 2 more great sessions coming up later this month, and I think that you'll enjoy them. Next week is total cost of ownership, and then finally, the final presentation will be on Fleet Speak.
Very good. Thank you, Willie. And I do have a quick question, or a couple questions here asking for copies of the slides. And yes, I will send these out to everyone that participated today. And then we'll also have the recording posted on the NPMA Asset Management YouTube channel as well a little bit later, probably by tomorrow. And we'll get the slides out this afternoon for those of you with the questions related to that. And Willie, you're getting a couple of remarks in. They really like your presentation. Great job. So fantastic. Thank you all.
I paid some people, Jessica.
Okay, awesome. I do have one question or one hand raised. Just a moment here. Alan, you are unmuted. It's been an accidental hand raise. I'm going to lower the hand.
Oh, darn.
Well, thank you so much, Willie. I really appreciate you doing this for us today. And I hope that you all on the phone will be able to participate in the other 3 webinars that we have planned for later this month. So thank you all for attending, and have a nice afternoon.
All right, thank you.